Love the look of old brick buildings. We like that buff-colored mortar and those rough, irregular, muddly tones of historic masonry. Traditionally, that is not what they were looking at when they walked down their streets, whether it was the streets of Richmond or Charleston. They were very, very refined masons. And they were very good masons and clean masons, and they were very proud of their work. They were also working with materials that dictated to them what they needed to do to make these buildings perform. So, I really strongly feel that anywhere from 90 to 95% of their historic masonry had some form of protective treatment on it. This treatment may have been a stucco, which is common. I mean, you see stucco all the time, or render, as to use the traditional term. And traces of render are very common. You can see what historic buildings were originally stucco. You've got traces of lime on the brick. Lime wash was very common as well, but what was more and more common was color wash, or a traditional red wash that was applied over masonry. I'll get to the red wash in just a second because I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on that subject. First, let's go through a couple of the others. Brick and lime construction in the U.S. You're talking about max masonry walls. Of course, this is only showing a white and a half, but or excuse me, pretty white masonry, I guess if you look at it that way. You're looking at multiple whites of masonry. Interior, the walls would have been finished with a 3-coat plasterwork for the most part, 2 rough coats and then a finish coat. And then you would have applied a lime wash or a traditional distemper, distemper being a mixture of chalk and glue sides and water and pigment, a very dynamic, very strong color coding, blues, greens, reds, very common. You would have done this for at least a year to allow the lime sufficient time to dry out and carbonate. Then you could put oil over top of it or wallpaper once that material had steadied up a bit. And exteriorly, on the exterior, you would have seen a lime wash. Lime washes were very common. This is a picture of Fort Moultrie down in outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And here along that top bed, you do start to see traces of a yellow lime wash. This building was originally lime wash, so you had a protective treatment. You had a protective coating over that brickwork to help protect the whole system. Historic buildings were made up of these multi-levels or multiple skins of protection. And we can't forget that. When we forget that, we're opening ourselves up for failure. So you have to remember how these historic buildings were put together in the first place. Yes, sir?
Are you saying they would have had a softer brick? Possibly, too?
Possibly. I'm going to show you some slides of some brick from the 1730s that are incredible. They are very strong, very hard. In those cases, a little different approach was taken. A second type of protection on historic masonry was stuccoing or rendering historic masonry. Again, mass wall construction, interior 3-coat plasterwork with a finish of some sort of top of it. Exterior, often you find 2 coats of stucco, a 2-coat stucco system or render system, and then an optional coat of lime wash. Most of the time you would have seen a lime wash on there. This project right here is the old Governor's Mansion in Milledgeville, Georgia. Was done, about 7-8 years ago, I believe, the restoration there. They knew it was a lime putty mortar, so they went back with the lime putty mortar in the restoration. They knew that it was stuccoed, so they stuccoed it, and they had records of it being lime washed originally, so they lime washed it. So you had all these multiple levels of protection. The skin as you work, the bones and muscles of the masonry. This is just a slide. I love this picture. A good friend of mine gave this to me. Alex Highlands. He's a master plasterer from Edinburgh, Scotland. But they do a lot of copperous lime washes over there. Copperous or iron sulfate is a form of pigment, basically. It comes in a very grayish green kind of color, very ugly color. About the color you see, a brownish grayish green there. My wife and I have 2 children, one of which is a 1-year-old little boy, and sometimes we have stuff that like that. But over time, as the iron sulfate is exposed to the elements, the iron starts to oxidize, and it turns the most vibrant rust color, kind of this ruddy orange. It actually oxidizes on the wall. And this was a very, very common technique in Scotland. On the same subject, since we're talking about protective treatments in Edinburgh, and this notion of historic masonry, historic masonry all over the world, it kind of was the same way. We love the look of these old stone castles in Scotland. Traditionally, they didn't look like that. They would have been stucco. They would have been rendered and lime washed. Stirling Castle, which I believe was home of Mary Queen of Scots, James VI, I believe, was born there. They just did a restoration a few years ago of the Great Hall there. The Great Hall is a separate building in the courtyard of the castle. And the entire thing was stuccoed and then coated with this very rich, creamy, yellow lime wash. And you've got this very dark, very gray castle. And in the center, this building that just glows. And it's used as an example of what the entire castle would have looked like traditionally. And it's quite controversial because, bright, pretty, colorful castles in Scotland, maybe wouldn't make as much money as the dark, dingy, gray castles. Anyway, but the thing that I really want to spend some time talking about are these color washes. Same principle, multiple widths of brick, interior plasterwork, interior finishes on top of it, and then exterior a color wash or a penciling, and/or penciling. Color wash is not to be confused with lime wash. There's no lime in color wash. Color wash is a blend of pigment. A lot of times you would have seen your iron oxides, your red colors, your red tones. Venetian red was quite commonly used. Spanish earth, kind of a purpley color, was used as well. Mixed with alum, traditional recipe called for an egg-sized lump of alum. The best type of alum for this application is potash alum or potassium aluminum sulfate for anybody that's really interested in this. And sometimes a little bit of glue size too. And this mixture would have been made hot. It would have been in big kettles on the construction site. It would have been heated over the course of days, cooking and simmering. And then finally, once the construction was done, they take it to the walls and they use it fresh and they paint this hot mix on. So a very, very, very common decorative feature. It was also protective as well. It acted as a certain level of water shedding to the masonry. Also prettied it up. It made everything nice and red and clean. Dates back for hundreds and hundreds of years. A friend of mine tells me a story of this manor house in England where he found traces of color wash. The problem with this manor house is it was a ruin the day that it was built. And this sounds kind of strange, but the story goes 400, 500 years ago, this lord built his son and his son's fiancée this huge manor house. And I can't recall the name of the structure, the name of the house itself. But built the son this house, and they were getting ready to get married and getting ready to move in. And the father finds out that his son has been running around on his fiancée. He had a couple of ladies down at the tavern that he liked to visit to. And it made the father furious. He really thought a lot of this young lady. He ordered the craftsman to rip the roof off of the house. So from the day that it was built, this house has been a ruin and no one's lived in it. And the building was color washed with pencil. So you see remnants of this red wash on this building that was never lived in. Some people like to say that these red washes are a Victorian thing that date kind of from the late 1800s, early 1900s. There are examples, including this one, that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. But this building is mid-1800s in Central Virginia, and you've got that color wash on there. Sometimes you see traces